The contract sat between them like a loaded gun. Elena Carter's hands trembled as she stared at the signature line, her last moment of freedom reduced to black ink on expensive paper. Across the mahogany desk, Adrian Voss watched her with eyes that could freeze hell itself. Outside, lightning split the sky. Inside, her father's life hung by a thread only this man could cut or save. "Sign it," Adrian said, his voice flat as death, "or watch everyone you love disappear." She picked up the pen. "Welcome to a story where love costs everything, and trust is the most dangerous game. Stay until the end to see how a contract written in desperation becomes something neither of them expected. Drop a like and comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels." The pen felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Elena's fingers wrapped around the gold-plated instrument, and for a split second, she considered throwing it across the room, considered standing up, walking out of this suffocating office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its view of a city that suddenly felt like a foreign country. But then she thought of her father, pale, unconscious, hooked to machines that beeped his failing heartbeat, and she pressed the tip to paper. Full legal name. Adrian Voss didn't look up from his own copy of the contract. He sat across from her in a chair that probably cost more than her childhood home, his suit so perfectly tailored it looked like armor. Everything about him screamed money and power and danger, the kind of danger you read about in news articles that never quite told the whole truth. Elena Maria Carter. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Date of birth: March 7th, 1996. Current address? She rattled it off, though it hardly mattered anymore. That cramped apartment in the deteriorating part of town wouldn't be hers much longer. Nothing would be hers much longer. She was signing that away, too. The contract was 12 pages long. She'd tried to read it earlier, but the lawyer, Adrian's lawyer, because of course she couldn't afford her own, had spoken so fast the words blurred together. Terms and conditions, obligations and expectations. A marriage that wasn't really a marriage. An arrangement that solved his problem and destroyed her life. Initial here. Adrian's bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Marcus, leaned over and pointed to a clause buried in Section 7. His finger was the size of a small pipe. And here, Elena initialed. And initialed, and initialed. Thunder cracked outside, close enough to rattle the windows. The storm had rolled in an hour ago, turning the November evening into something out of a Gothic novel. How fitting, how perfectly bitterly fitting. You understand what you're agreeing to. Adrian finally looked at her, and Elena wished he hadn't. His eyes were gray, not soft gray, not warm gray, but the gray of storm clouds and concrete and things that didn't bend. This isn't temporary. I understand. She didn't, not really, but what choice did she have? You'll live in my home. Follow my rules. Present yourself as my wife in all public settings. I understand. You'll have an allowance, security, healthcare, everything you need. Everything except freedom, Elena thought, but she just nodded. In return, your father's debts disappear. The people who are going to kill him tomorrow, they disappear too. Your sister finishes college without looking over her shoulder. Adrian leaned back, his expression unreadable. You get to keep your family. I get what I need. And what do you need? The question slipped out before Elena could stop it. For the first time, something flickered across Adrian's face. Not quite emotion. He seemed incapable of that. But something. A crack in the facade. That's not your concern. I'm signing my life away. I think it's a little bit my concern. Marcus shifted, a warning gesture, but Adrian held up one hand. Careful. Or what? Elena surprised herself with the edge in her voice. Fear did strange things to people, made them reckless, made them brave when they had nothing left to lose. You'll tear up the contract? Let my father die? I'm here, aren't I? I'm doing exactly what you demanded. The least you can do is tell me why. Silence stretched between them. Outside, rain began to fall, pelting the windows in sheets. The city below blurred into streaks of light and shadow. My business requires certain appearances, Adrian said finally. Stability, respectability. A wife provides that. You couldn't find someone willing, someone who'd actually want to marry you? No one I could trust. Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. And you trust me? A woman you're blackmailing? I trust that you'll do anything to protect your family. That's more reliable than love. He said the word like it tasted bad. Love makes people stupid, desperate, unpredictable. And what am I? Controlled. Adrian slid a pen across the desk. Sign the last page, Elena. This conversation is over. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, explanations, some kind of justification for why her normal, ordinary, struggling life had collided with whatever dark world Adrian Voss inhabited. But her father's face flashed through her mind, his smile, his terrible jokes, the way he'd worked 3 jobs to keep her and Sophie fed after their mother died. He'd made mistakes. Borrowed money from the wrong people, let desperation drive him into corners that had no good exits. Now she was doing the same thing. Elena signed. The moment her signature touched the final page, something shifted in the room. Marcus relaxed fractionally. Adrian closed his folder with the finality of a judge's gavel, and Elena felt the door to her old life slam shut. There's a car waiting downstairs, Adrian said, standing. You have 1 hour to say goodbye to your family. Bring only what you need. Everything else will be provided. 1 hour? Elena's voice cracked. That's it? That's generous. I can't. I need more time. You have 1 hour, Elena. Adrian buttoned his suit jacket, every movement precise and cold. Use it wisely. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and despair. Elena walked the familiar corridors in a daze, barely registering the nurses' stations and waiting rooms and the soft beep of medical equipment that had become the soundtrack to the worst month of her life. Marcus followed 3 steps behind, silent as a shadow, a constant reminder that her life no longer belonged to her. Her father's room was at the end of the hall, room 347. She'd memorized everything about it, the scuff mark on the doorframe, the faulty fluorescent light that flickered, the view of the parking lot that her father had joked was prime real estate. He wasn't joking about anything now. Dad? Elena pushed open the door, her throat already tightening. It's me. Robert Carter looked smaller than she remembered. The machines breathing for him, feeding him, keeping his damaged heart beating, they made him seem fragile, breakable. He'd always been her rock, her constant, and now he was this. Tubes and wires and a body that had given up fighting. Hey! Sophie looked up from the chair beside the bed, her eyes red-rimmed. At 19, Elena's sister still had that college kid optimism that refused to die completely, even now. Visiting hours are almost over. I know. Elena moved to the other side of the bed, taking her father's hand. It was warm, at least. That was something. I needed to see him. Any news? About the money? Elena's stomach twisted. She'd told Sophie she was working on it, told her not to worry, told her everything would be okay, the same lie on repeat for weeks while she'd scrambled for solutions that didn't exist. It's handled, Elena said quietly. Sophie's head snapped up. What? The debt. The men who are coming, all of it, it's handled. How? Sophie stood, hope and confusion warring on her face. Elena, what did you do? What I had to. That's not an answer. Elena squeezed her father's hand, trying to memorize how it felt. I made a deal. A good deal. Dad's safe now. You're safe. You can finish school without... What kind of deal? Sophie's voice rose. Elena, what did you do? I got married. The words hung in the air like a confession. Sophie stared at her, mouth open, processing. Then, you're lying. I'm not. You don't even have a boyfriend. You work 60 hours a week at that awful diner and spend every free minute here. When would you... Who would you... Sophie's eyes widened. Oh my God. This is about the men who came to the apartment, isn't it? The ones in the expensive suits who looked like they'd break your legs for fun. Elena didn't answer. Didn't need to. Sophie was sharp. She'd figure it out. You married one of them. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. You married a criminal to save us. I married someone who can protect us. That's all that matters. That's insane. It's done. Elena let go of her father's hand and faced her sister. I'm leaving tonight. I won't be able to visit as often, but you'll be taken care of. There's money for school, for Dad's treatment, for everything. You just have to trust me. Trust you? Sophie looked like she'd been slapped. You just sold yourself to some... Don't. Elena's voice cracked. Please don't make this harder. They stood on opposite sides of their father's hospital bed, a chasm opening between them. Sophie's anger was palpable, mixed with fear and betrayal and a desperate love that made everything worse. Elena understood. If their positions were reversed, she'd be furious too. But they weren't reversed. Elena was the older sister, the one who'd promised their dying mother she'd take care of everyone. The one who'd carried that weight for 10 years, never complaining, never failing. Until now. I need you to promise me something, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Take care of Dad. Finish school. Live your life. Don't waste time trying to find me or fix this. It's not fixable. Elena, promise me, Sophie. Her sister's face crumpled. I promise. They hugged across the hospital bed, clinging to each other while machines beeped and rain hammered the windows and the clock on the wall ticked down Elena's final minutes of freedom. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. I love you, Elena said. Always. I love you too. Sophie wiped her eyes. If he hurts you, whoever he is, I'll kill him myself. Elena almost smiled. Noted. She kissed her father's forehead, whispered a goodbye he couldn't hear, and walked out of the room before she could change her mind. Marcus was waiting in the hallway, patient and immovable as a boulder. Time's up, he said, not unkindly. I know. The drive to Elena's apartment took 15 minutes. She packed a single suitcase, clothes, toiletries, a few photographs she couldn't leave behind. Her entire life condensed into 50 pounds of fabric and memories. When she emerged from her bedroom, Marcus was examining the water-stained ceiling with professional detachment. Ready? He asked. No. Elena locked the door behind her. But let's go anyway. Adrian's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Voss Tower, a gleaming monument to wealth and power that dominated the city's skyline. Elena had seen it from a distance before. Everyone had. But standing in the lobby, riding the private elevator with Marcus's key card, watching the floor numbers climb into the stratosphere, she felt like she was ascending into another dimension. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. No hallway, no buffer. Just straight into a living space so vast and empty it could have housed a small village. Jesus, Elena breathed. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 walls, offering a view of the city that looked computer-generated. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials, leather and steel and glass. Everything was gray or white or black. No color, no warmth, no indication that an actual human being lived here. Mr. Voss is in his office, Marcus said, setting her suitcase down. I'll show you to your room. My room? Elena had assumed, well, she didn't know what she'd assumed, that she'd be sharing his bedroom, that this marriage would include actual marital expectations. Your room, Marcus confirmed. He led her down a hallway past closed doors and empty spaces, finally stopping at the second-to-last door on the left. Bathroom's through there. Closet's empty. Someone will bring appropriate clothing tomorrow. If you need anything, there's an intercom system. Elena stepped inside. The bedroom was bigger than her entire apartment had been. King-size bed, sitting area, a view that could make angels weep, and somehow it felt like a cage. Ground rules, Marcus continued. Don't enter Mr. Voss's private office or bedroom without permission. Don't leave the building without security. Don't speak to the media. Don't live my life. Got it. Marcus's expression didn't change. Breakfast is at 7. Mr. Voss expects punctuality. Then he left, and Elena was alone. She stood in the center of that obscenely large bedroom, her reflection multiplied in the windows that showed her a city of 8 million people who weren't trapped in a gilded cage. The storm had passed. Stars were trying to break through the remaining clouds. Everything looked peaceful from up here. Beautiful, even. Elena wanted to scream. Instead, she unpacked, hung her thrift store clothes in a closet designed for a wardrobe 10 times the size, set her photographs on the nightstand, her parents on their wedding day, Sophie's high school graduation, a Christmas morning before everything fell apart, arranged her life into the corners of this impersonal space, and tried to pretend it was home. At midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway, heard a door open and close, heard silence settle over the penthouse like snow. Adrian was home. her husband, the stranger she'd signed herself over to. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift and reform while her mind replayed the day on an endless loop. The contract, the hospital. Sophie's face when she'd realized what Elena had done. The elevator ride up to this tower that felt less like a home and more like a very expensive prison. Somewhere in the penthouse, Adrian was awake too. She could feel it somehow. That awareness of another presence, alone but not alone, separated by walls and rules and an arrangement that made sense to everyone except the two people trapped inside it. The city lights burned below them. The world kept turning. And Elena Carter, now Elena Voss, wondered what fresh hell tomorrow would bring. Muck. She found out at 7 a.m., sharp. The dining room was as impersonal as the rest of the penthouse. A table that could seat 12, chairs that looked like modern art installations, and Adrian sitting at the head reading something on his tablet while eating what appeared to be egg whites and toast. "Sit," he said without looking up. Elena sat. Immediately, a woman appeared from the kitchen, middle-aged, efficient, wearing a uniform that suggested she was staff rather than family. She set down a plate identical to Adrian's along with coffee that smelled like it cost more per cup than Elena used to make in an hour. "Thank you," Elena said. The woman nodded and disappeared. "Her name is Margaret," Adrian said, still focused on his screen. "She manages the household. If you need anything, ask her." "Okay." "Eat." Elena picked up her fork. The eggs were perfectly prepared, which somehow made them worse. She'd eaten plenty of meals alone in her life, but never one that felt this hollow. Across from her, Adrian was a study in controlled efficiency. Every movement precise. Every second accounted for. He ate like it was a task to complete, not something to enjoy. 5 minutes passed in silence. "You'll need appropriate clothing," Adrian said finally. "Margaret will take you to select a wardrobe this afternoon." "I have clothes." "Not for the functions you'll be attending." Elena set down her fork. "What functions?" "Charity galas, business dinners, events where my presence is required." Adrian finally looked at her, his gray eyes flat. "You're my wife now. You'll be expected to act like it." "I don't know how to act like the wife of a—" Elena stopped herself. "Go ahead, say it, like the wife of someone like you." "Someone like me?" Adrian's mouth quirked, but it wasn't a smile. "You'll learn. You're smart enough." "How generous." "It's an observation, not a compliment." He returned to his tablet. "We have an event Saturday night. Foundation fundraiser. You'll need to be presentable." "Presentable?" Elena repeated. "Like a show dog." "Like my wife." "There's a difference?" This time Adrian did look at her, really looked, in a way that made Elena's skin prickle. "You signed the contract, Elena. You agreed to the terms. If you're having second thoughts, I'm not. Then stop fighting me on every little thing. It's exhausting." Elena bit back the retort that clawed up her throat. He was right. She had signed. She had agreed. Pushing back on breakfast arrangements and wardrobe selections was just wasting energy she'd need for bigger battles down the road. But damn, it felt good to push back. "Fine," she said. "I'll go shopping. I'll be presentable. I'll smile and nod and play the perfect wife." "Good." Adrian stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "I have meetings until 8. Don't wait up." He left without another word. Just walked out of the dining room like she was a piece of furniture he'd briefly acknowledged before moving on to important things. Elena sat alone at that ridiculous table, her eggs going cold, her coffee untouched, and felt the full weight of her decision settle over her shoulders. This was her life now. Mornings with a man who looked at her like a business transaction. Days spent pretending to be someone she wasn't. Nights in a golden cage while somewhere in the city, her family was safe because she'd traded herself for their survival. Worth it, she told herself. It had to be worth it. Margaret reappeared to clear the plates. "Mr. Voss mentioned you'd need a wardrobe consultation?" "Apparently. I'll make the arrangements." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "It's not as bad as it seems, dear. You'll adjust." "Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true, Mr. Voss is particular, but he's fair." Elena doubted that, but she just nodded. Margaret left, and Elena was alone again in the vast, empty penthouse. She wandered through the rooms, cataloging everything she found. A gym that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, a library with books that appeared unread, arranged by color rather than content. An office door that was locked. Adrian's private space, off limits. A kitchen that was professional grade but somehow sterile, like it was designed for efficiency rather than the messy business of actually living. Nowhere felt lived in. Nowhere felt like home. Elena ended up back in her bedroom, staring at the photographs on her nightstand. In the wedding picture, her parents looked young and stupidly happy. Her father's arm was around her mother's waist. Her mother's smile could have lit up the whole damn world. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered to the photograph. "I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out a better way." Her mother didn't answer. Dead people never did. The shopping trip was exactly as awful as Elena expected. Margaret drove her to a district where the stores didn't have prices in the windows because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. They went to boutiques that smelled like expensive perfume and judgment, where salespeople looked at Elena's thrift store jeans and clearance rack sweater with thinly veiled disdain before Margaret mentioned Mr. Voss, and suddenly everyone was very interested in helping. "We need evening wear," Margaret said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Cocktail dresses, business-appropriate day wear. Nothing too flashy. Mr. Voss prefers understated elegance." Of course he did. Elena tried on dress after dress. Each one cost more than a month of her old rent. The fabrics felt wrong against her skin, too smooth, too perfect, like she was being wrapped in money she hadn't earned. The saleswoman kept bringing options in darker colors. Navy, charcoal, black, everything designed to help her fade into the background, to be seen but not noticed. "What about that one?" Elena pointed to a dress in the window, deep red, cut beautifully, the kind of thing that demanded attention. The saleswoman hesitated. "That's quite bold." "I'll try it." Margaret raised an eyebrow, but didn't object. Elena pulled on the red dress, and for the first time all day, she looked in the mirror and recognized herself. Not the scared girl who'd signed her life away, not the wife in name only playing dress-up for a man she didn't know. Just Elena. Still here, still fighting. "We'll take it," she said. "Mr. Voss might not," the saleswoman began. "We'll take it," Elena repeated, harder this time. Margaret nodded slowly. "Add it to the order." They left with enough clothing to fill Elena's new closet 3 times over. Dresses and suits and shoes and accessories, all carefully selected to transform her into the kind of woman who belonged on Adrian Voss's arm. Elena watched the total climb into numbers that made her dizzy and tried not to think about how many shifts she'd have had to work at the diner to afford even one of these outfits. "Thank you," she told Margaret as they loaded bags into the car. "It's my job, dear." "No, I mean," Elena struggled to find words. "For the red dress? For not arguing?" Margaret's expression softened. "Mr. Voss hired me 5 years ago. In all that time, I've never seen him bring anyone here, never seen him care enough to make this arrangement." She paused. "Whatever his reasons, you're the first person who's gotten under that armor. Even a little. I don't want to get under his armor. I want to survive this." "Maybe they're the same thing." Elena didn't answer. She rode back to the tower in silence, watching the city blur past, and wondered if Margaret was right. If getting under Adrian's armor, breaking through that cold, controlled exterior, was the key to surviving this marriage, or if it was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. Adrian came home at 9:30, not 8. Elena heard the elevator open, heard his footsteps in the hallway, and felt her shoulders tense. She was in the living room attempting to read one of the untouched books from the library when he appeared in the doorway. "You're still up," he said. "You told me not to wait up. You didn't say I had to go to bed." Adrian's tie was loosened. His jacket was gone. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Not physically exhausted, but worn down. Like whatever he'd been dealing with all day had taken more than he'd expected to give. "How was shopping?" he asked, moving to the bar in the corner. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey without asking if she wanted any. "Expensive. That's the point." "Is it?" Elena set down her book. "Or is the point to dress me up like a doll so I fit your image?" Adrian took a drink. considering her. You don't like the clothes. I don't like being told what to wear. There's a difference. You need to look appropriate for your world. I know. Margaret explained. Elena stood, suddenly tired of sitting, tired of this conversation, tired of everything. I got the message. I'll wear the right clothes, say the right things, be the perfect accessory, but don't expect me to be grateful about it. I don't expect gratitude, Adrian said quietly. I expect compliance. Well, you'll get that. It's in the contract. Something flickered across his face. That crack again. The one that appeared when she pushed too hard. You really hate me, don't you? The question caught Elena off guard. She'd expected anger or dismissal, not this strange vulnerability that felt as dangerous as his cold exterior. I don't know you well enough to hate you, she said honestly, but I hate this. The situation, the cage, the fact that my life isn't mine anymore. It never was, Adrian said. No one's life is truly theirs. We're all trapped by circumstances, family, debt, expectations. At least now your father is alive. At least, Elena echoed bitterly. They stood in the vast living room, the city glittering behind them, and Elena realized this was the most honest conversation they'd had. No lawyers, no contracts, just two people trapped in an arrangement neither of them had wanted, trying to figure out how to exist in the same space without destroying each other. The red dress, Adrian said suddenly. Margaret mentioned it. Elena tensed. If you don't like it, I'll return. Wear it Saturday. She blinked. What? To the fundraiser. Wear the red dress. Adrian finished his whiskey and set the glass down. If you're going to be miserable, you might as well look good doing it. Before Elena could respond, he walked away. She heard his office door open and close, then silence. She stood alone in the living room, holding a book she hadn't been reading, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd noticed the dress. He'd approved. He'd made something that felt almost like a concession, even if he'd wrapped it in his usual cold delivery. It wasn't much. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was something. Elena went to bed that night thinking about red dresses and whiskey and the way Adrian's expression had shifted when he asked if she hated him. Like the answer mattered. Like underneath all that ice, there was something human after all. Dangerous thought. Stupid thought. He was her captor, not her friend. The sooner she remembered that, the better. But as she drifted towards sleep, Elena couldn't quite shake the feeling that the man who'd bought her freedom wasn't as simple as he pretended to be. That the armor he wore so perfectly had cracks she was only beginning to see. And that those cracks might be the most dangerous thing about him. The days that followed developed a rhythm Elena hadn't expected. She woke to find Adrian already gone, the penthouse silent except for the hum of the city 40 floors below. Margaret would appear with breakfast, always simple, always perfectly prepared, and then disappear like a ghost. Elena spent her mornings exploring the tower's amenities, the gym where she tried to burn off the restless energy that built up inside her, the pool on the 38th floor that she had entirely to herself. By the time Adrian returned each evening, she'd retreated to her room or the library, maintaining the distance he seemed to prefer. They'd eat dinner in that cavernous dining room, exchanging maybe a dozen words between them. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It just was. A state of existence they'd both tacitly agreed upon. But Saturday came faster than Elena wanted. She stood in front of her closet at 5 p.m., staring at the red dress like it might bite her. It had been one thing to choose it in the boutique, to make that small act of defiance. Actually wearing it felt different, heavier, like she was making a statement she wasn't sure she wanted to make. Stupid, she muttered, pulling it off the hanger. It's just a dress. Except it wasn't. Nothing in this new life was just anything. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did, with tailoring that probably cost more than her car used to be worth before it died 2 years ago. Elena stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Her hair, which she'd learned to style from YouTube videos, fell in soft waves. The makeup she'd applied with shaking hands made her eyes look bigger, more dramatic. And the dress made her look like she belonged in Adrian's world, even if she felt like an imposter. A knock on her door made her jump. Come in. Margaret entered, her expression warm. Oh, you look beautiful, dear. I look terrified. That too, but mostly beautiful. Margaret held out a jewelry box. Mr. Voss asked me to give you these. Inside was a necklace, diamonds, because of course, and matching earrings. Simple, elegant, probably worth more than Elena's entire existence before this arrangement. She stared at them like they might explode. I can't wear these. You have to. Mr. Voss was specific. What if I lose them? What if someone steals them? What if… Elena. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. They're insured, and you won't lose them. Just breathe. Easy for her to say. Margaret wasn't the one about to walk into a room full of wealthy strangers wearing a fortune around her neck and pretending to be something she absolutely wasn't. But Elena let Margaret fasten the necklace, the cold metal settling against her skin like a collar. The earrings followed. When she looked in the mirror again, she saw someone else entirely. Someone polished and expensive and completely fake. He's waiting downstairs, Margaret said. You'll do fine. Elena wasn't sure about that, but she picked up the small clutch purse Margaret had selected, took one last breath, and walked out of her room before fear could root her in place. Adrian stood by the elevator, checking his phone. He wore a tuxedo that made him look even more untouchable than usual. All sharp lines and perfect tailoring, like he'd been carved from marble and dressed for a museum exhibition. When he looked up and saw her, something crossed his face too quickly for Elena to identify. You're ready, he said. Not a question, not a compliment, just a statement. As I'll ever be. His gaze moved from her face to the dress, lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Good choice. You told me to wear it. I told you that you could. There's a difference. Adrian pocketed his phone. The car is waiting. They rode down in silence. Elena's heels clicked against the marble lobby floor, too loud in the quiet space. The doorman opened the door with a practiced smile, and there was a sleek black car waiting, the kind with windows so dark you couldn't see inside. Marcus was already in the driver's seat. Adrian held the door for her. Elena slid into the leather interior, the dress whispering against her legs, and tried not to feel like she was being transported to her own execution. Ground rules, Adrian said once they were moving through the city's streets. Stay close to me. Don't discuss our arrangement with anyone. If someone asks how we met, tell them through mutual friends. Keep answers vague. Lie, you mean. Protect your privacy. There's a difference. You keep saying that. There's a difference. Like the distinction makes it better. Adrian turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Does it matter? Whether it's better? You signed the contract. This is the job. Being your wife is a job. Being my wife in public is a job. What you are in private is something else entirely. Elena wanted to ask what that something else was, but they were pulling up to the venue, a historic building wrapped in lights and crawling with photographers. Her stomach dropped. There are cameras, she said, hearing the panic in her own voice. Of course there are. This is a high-profile event. You didn't mention cameras. I didn't think I needed to. Adrian's hand found hers, his grip firm but not painful. Smile. Act natural. And for the love of everything, don't look like you're being held hostage. I am being held hostage. Then you're a very well-dressed hostage who's about to help me navigate 2 hours of insufferable small talk with people I barely tolerate. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so unexpected that Elena almost jerked away. Breathe, Elena. It's just a party. The car door opened. Light and sound flooded in. Adrian stepped out first, then turned to offer his hand. Elena took it, her legs shaking, and emerged into a wall of camera flashes that made her want to crawl back into the vehicle and hide. Mr. Voss, someone shouted. Who's your date? Mr. Voss, is this the mystery woman we've been hearing about? Can we get a name? Adrian's hand moved to the small of her back, steady and warm through the fabric of her dress. Smile, he murmured, barely audible. Just for a second. Elena smiled. It felt like cracking glass, but she held it while they walked up the steps, Adrian's presence beside her, the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. The cameras kept flashing. People kept shouting questions. And then they were inside, the doors closing behind them, and the noise faded to a more manageable roar of conversation and clinking glasses. I hate you, Elena breathed. Noted. Come on. The ballroom was exactly what she'd expected. Chandeliers, expensive suits, women in gowns that probably required engineering degrees to construct. Everyone looked perfect. Everyone looked like they belonged. Elena felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's closet, except her mother had never owned anything like this. "Adrian!" A man approached them, silver-haired and smiling too wide. "Good to see you. And who's this lovely creature?" "My wife," Adrian said smoothly. "Elena, this is Charles Pemberton. He sits on the foundation board." "Wife?" Charles's eyebrows shot up. "Since when are you married?" "Since recently." Adrian's hand remained on Elena's back. "We've been keeping it quiet." "I'll say." "Congratulations, my boy. And congratulations to you, Mrs. Voss. You've landed quite a catch." Elena forced herself to smile. "Lucky me. Where did you two meet?" Charles was already scanning the room for his next conversation, but still fishing for details. "Through mutual friends," Elena said, exactly as coached. "It was quite unexpected. Isn't it always? Well, welcome to the madness. Adrian, we need to talk about the Henderson merger at some point tonight." "Later," Adrian said firmly. "Enjoy the party, Charles." They moved deeper into the crowd. More people approached. More questions, more congratulations, more thinly veiled curiosity about where Elena had come from and why Adrian Voss, notorious for avoiding commitment of any kind, had suddenly acquired a wife. Elena played her part, smiled, made vague comments, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and the entire time Adrian stayed close, closer than necessary, his hand finding her waist, her elbow, the small of her back, touching her like they were actually a couple, like this was real. "You're doing well," he said during a brief moment when they were alone near the bar. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "Don't. It's a rental." Adrian ordered 2 glasses of champagne, handing her one. "Sip this. It'll help." "Is that what you do? Drink to tolerate these people?" "Among other strategies." He took a drink, his expression flat. "Most of them are insufferable. Talking just to hear themselves talk. Making deals they'll break by Tuesday." "Then why come?" "Because power isn't just about money. It's about presence, being seen, maintaining relationships even when you'd rather set them on fire." Adrian's gaze swept the room. "This is part of the game." "Sounds exhausting." "It is, but necessary." A woman in a silver dress materialized beside them, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Adrian, darling, is it true? Are you actually married?" "Victoria." Adrian's tone cooled several degrees. "Yes, it's true. Elena, this is Victoria Chambers. We've known each other for years." The way he said "known each other" made Elena's stomach twist. Victoria looked her up and down with the kind of assessment women give other women when they're deciding whether to be threatened or dismissive. "Charming," Victoria said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I have to say, Adrian, this is quite unlike you. You always swore you'd never marry." "People change." "Do they?" Victoria's smile widened. "Well, I hope you're happy, though I have to wonder what inspired such a sudden change of heart." "Love," Elena heard herself say. "It tends to be unpredictable." The word hung in the air between them. Adrian's hand tightened fractionally on her waist. Victoria's expression flickered. Surprise, calculation, something else Elena couldn't name. "How romantic," Victoria said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Well, congratulations to you both. I'm sure it will be quite the adventure." She drifted away, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and unspoken implications. Adrian's hand dropped from Elena's waist. "That was unnecessary," he said quietly. "What was?" "The love comment. She was fishing. I shut her down." "By lying." Elena turned to face him. "Isn't that what we're doing, Elaine? Pretending? Playing house for all these people who don't actually care about anything except gossip and status? There's a difference between necessary lies and unnecessary ones. I know. You've made that very clear." Elena set down her champagne glass, suddenly tired of the charade. "Who is she? Victoria?" "No one important." "That's not an answer." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Someone I used to know. It ended years ago. It's not relevant." "Except she clearly still wants it to be relevant." "That's her problem, not mine." He checked his watch. "We need to stay another hour at minimum. Can you manage that?" "I've managed everything else." Something in his expression shifted. "You have. Better than I expected, actually." "Is that a compliment?" It's an observation. You say that a lot too, because it's accurate. Adrian signaled the bartender for another drink. You're uncomfortable, but you're not falling apart. Most people would be falling apart. Maybe I'm just better at hiding it. Maybe. He accepted his drink, his gaze steady on her. Or maybe you're stronger than you think you are. The words hit differently than Elena expected. Not quite a compliment, but not dismissive either. Just a statement of fact that felt somehow heavier than everything else he'd said tonight. Before she could respond, another couple approached them, launching into conversation about the foundation's work and upcoming projects. Elena fell back into her role, smiling, nodding, letting Adrian carry most of the conversation while she observed. The way people looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear, the way his expression never changed, no matter who he was talking to. The way he kept her close, his hand returning to her waist or elbow, like he was anchoring her, or maybe anchoring himself. An hour dragged into 90 minutes. Elena's feet ached in her heels. Her face hurt from smiling, but she maintained the performance until Adrian finally leaned close and murmured, "We can leave now." The drive back to the tower was silent. Elena kicked off her heels the moment they were in the car, her relief so profound she almost laughed. Adrian loosened his tie, the first crack in his perfect exterior she'd seen all night. "You did well," he said as they rode the elevator up to the penthouse. High praise from someone who never seems pleased with anything. I'm pleased when things meet expectations. And I met them? You exceeded them. Adrian looked at her, really looked, and Elena felt pinned by the weight of his attention. Victoria was testing you. Most people crack under that kind of pressure. I spent years waitressing in a place where customers treated me like garbage. Victoria Chambers doesn't scare me. No, Adrian said slowly. I don't think much scares you. The elevator opened. Elena stepped out, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the penthouse felt different with both of them in it, tension crackling in the space between them like static electricity. Thank you, she said finally, for saying I did well. I know it probably cost you something to admit that. It didn't cost me anything. Then you're welcome for making your life easier tonight, even if I am just what did you call it? A strategic arrangement. Elena walked toward her bedroom before Adrian could respond. She needed space, needed air, needed to get out of this dress and these diamonds and this version of herself that felt too close to real. But his voice stopped her halfway down the hall. Elena! She turned. He stood in the living room, still in his tuxedo, looking less like a crime lord and more like a man who was genuinely struggling with something. The perfect mask had slipped, just for a moment. You looked beautiful tonight, he said quietly. I should have told you that before we left. The words shouldn't have mattered, shouldn't have affected her, but they did, landing somewhere in her chest and settling there like stones in water. Good night, Adrian, she said, because she didn't know what else to say. Good night. Elena made it to her room, closed the door, and leaned against it, her heart hammering. She stripped off the dress, the diamonds, the carefully constructed armor of her borrowed life, stood in front of the mirror in her underwear, and stared at the woman looking back, caught between who she'd been and who she was becoming. This was supposed to be simple, a transaction, a marriage on paper that meant nothing in practice. But Adrian Voss was proving to be more complicated than she'd expected. The way he'd protected her tonight, kept her close, defended her to Victoria without hesitation. The way he'd called her beautiful, like the admission hurt, dangerous. All of it was dangerous. Elena climbed into bed and tried not to think about how his hand had felt on her back, warm and steady. Tried not to think about the look on his face when she'd mentioned love, like she'd struck a nerve he didn't know he had. Tried not to think about how, for a few hours tonight, pretending to be his wife hadn't felt quite as awful as she'd expected. The week that followed shifted something fundamental between them. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but there were small changes that accumulated like snow, quiet and gradual, until suddenly the landscape looked different. Adrian started coming home earlier. Not early. His days were still brutal marathons of meetings and phone calls and whatever dark business required his attention, but earlier than before. He'd find Elena in the library or the living room, and instead of disappearing into his office, he'd pour himself a drink and sit nearby. Not talking, exactly, just existing in the same space. Elena found herself anticipating his arrival, listening for the elevator, wondering what mood he'd be in, whether the day had gone well or badly, whether that crack in his armor would show again. On Wednesday, she made the mistake of asking, "Rough day?" Adrian looked up from his whiskey, surprise flickering across his face. "Why do you ask?" "You look tired, more than usual." "I'm always tired." "That's not an answer." He studied her for a long moment. Difficult negotiations. People who don't understand when they've lost. The usual. Sounds frustrating. It is. Adrian took another drink. But it's handled now. Elena wanted to ask what handled meant in his world, wanted to understand the details of his life beyond what she saw in the penthouse. But she'd learned that Adrian Voss gave information in careful increments, never more than necessary, and pushing too hard shut him down completely. So instead she asked, "Do you ever get tired of it? The business? The games? All of it? Every day?" "Then why do it?" "Because it's what I know. What I built. Walking away would mean everything I've done was for nothing." "Would that be so bad? Starting over?" Adrian's laugh was bitter. "You don't start over in my world. You either stay on top or you disappear. There's no middle ground." "That sounds lonely." "It is." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. "But loneliness is safer than trust. Trust gets you killed." Elena thought about that as she watched him finish his drink and retreat to his office. Thought about a man who'd built an empire out of fear and control because trusting anyone felt more dangerous than isolation. Thought about how sad that was, even if he'd never admit it. Friday morning, she woke to find a note on the kitchen counter in handwriting she was starting to recognize. Sharp, precise. No wasted space. "Out of town until Sunday. Margaret has my number if you need anything. Stay in the building." Elena stared at the note, an unexpected disappointment settling in her chest, which was stupid. She should be thrilled to have the penthouse to herself for 3 days. Freedom, or as close to it as she could get, but the space felt emptier without Adrian in it, quieter, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. Saturday night, Elena found herself in Adrian's library, pulling books off shelves and actually reading them instead of just using them as props. She discovered he had surprisingly good taste, classic literature mixed with history and philosophy, books that showed signs of actual use unlike the decorative volumes in the living room. She was curled up in his reading chair halfway through a worn copy of something old and Russian when her phone buzzed. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," Elena answered, her voice rough from disuse. "You're alive." Sophie sounded relieved and angry in equal measure. "I've been calling all week." "I know, I'm sorry. Things have been busy." "Busy doing what? Being a crime lord's trophy wife?" "Sophie, don't. I've been doing research on Adrian Voss. He's not just wealthy, Elena. He's dangerous. There are rumors about him, about his business, about people who cross him. You're living with someone who saved Dad's life," Elena interrupted, "who paid for his treatment, who made sure you can finish school without looking over your shoulder every 5 seconds. At what cost?" "A cost I'm willing to pay." Silence stretched between them. Elena could hear her sister breathing, could imagine the expression on her face, worry mixed with frustration, mixed with the helpless anger of someone who couldn't fix a problem. "Are you safe?" Sophie asked finally. "I'm safe." "Are you happy?" Elena looked around the library, at the books and the expensive furniture, and the view of a city that felt 1,000,000 miles away. "I'm adjusting." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." They talked for a few more minutes, careful around the edges of topics they couldn't discuss. Sophie updated her on their father's progress. He was stable, improving slowly, still unaware of how his life had been saved. Elena listened and made appropriate responses and tried not to feel the distance growing between them like a canyon. When she hung up, the penthouse felt even emptier than before. Sunday afternoon, Elena was in the kitchen helping Margaret prep dinner when the elevator chimed. Her heart jumped. Ridiculous, unwelcome, but there it was. Adrian was home. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. His suit was wrinkled. There was a cut above his left eyebrow, barely visible, but definitely there. And he moved like something hurt, though he was trying to hide it. "What happened?" Elena asked before she could stop herself. "Nothing important." Adrian's voice was flat, tired. "You're bleeding." "It's handled." "Adrian." It's handled, Elena. He started toward his bedroom, then paused. I need to shower. We'll eat in 30 minutes. He disappeared down the hall. Elena looked at Margaret, who'd gone very still. Does this happen a lot? Elena asked quietly. Sometimes. Margaret's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Voss handles difficult situations. Sometimes they get physical. He needs to see a doctor. He won't. I've tried. Elena thought about that through dinner. Adrian sitting across from her with his fresh cut and his careful movements and his absolute refusal to acknowledge that anything was wrong. She thought about how he'd built his life around control and self-sufficiency and never ever showing weakness. She thought about how exhausting that must be. When dinner ended and Adrian stood to leave, Elena stood too. Let me see, she said. See what? Whatever injury you're hiding under that shirt. Elena, please. The word came out softer than she intended. Just let me see. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then, surprisingly, he unbuttoned his shirt. The bruising across his ribs was spectacular, purple and black, spreading across his side like someone had taken a baseball bat to him. Elena's breath caught. It looks worse than it is, Adrian said, already moving to rebutton the shirt. Sit down. I don't need... Sit down. Maybe it was her tone. Maybe he was just too tired to argue. But Adrian sat, and Elena disappeared into the bathroom, returning with the first aid kit she'd spotted weeks ago. She worked in silence, checking the bruising as carefully as she could, making sure nothing felt broken or displaced. You should see a doctor, she said finally. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. Adrian caught her wrist, stopping her movements. His grip was gentle but firm. Why do you care? Elena met his gaze. I don't know. Maybe because watching someone suffer feels wrong, even if they're too stubborn to admit they're suffering. I'm not suffering. You're lying through your teeth. Something shifted in his expression, almost a smile, but not quite. You're very difficult, you know that? You're not exactly easy yourself. They stayed like that for a moment. Her wrist in his hand, his defenses down, the space between them charged with something Elena couldn't name. Then Adrian released her and stood, buttoning his shirt with careful movements. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For caring. Even when you shouldn't. He left before Elena could respond. She sat alone at the dining table, the first aid kit open in front of her, and wondered what the hell was happening to her carefully maintained emotional distance. This was supposed to be simple, a transaction. But nothing about Adrian Voss was simple. And the more time Elena spent in his world, the more she realized that the ice he projected hid something far more complicated underneath. Something wounded, something human, something that responded when she pushed back instead of shutting her out completely. Dangerous, she thought again. All of it was dangerous. But Elena was starting to realize that danger and survival sometimes looked exactly the same. And if she was going to survive this arrangement, she needed to understand the man she'd married. Not the public version, not the controlled exterior. The actual person hiding underneath all that armor. Even if discovering him meant risking more than she'd bargained for. The shift between them didn't announce itself. It crept in slowly over the following days, like water finding cracks in stone. Adrian stopped disappearing into his office the moment he came home. Elena stopped retreating to her bedroom like a prisoner avoiding her warden. They occupied the same spaces more often, the silence between them evolving from uncomfortable to something almost companionable. Almost, because underneath the surface calm, Elena could feel something building. Tension that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with proximity. With knowing someone was in the next room. With catching glimpses of Adrian in the morning before he'd fully assembled his armor. Hair still damp from the shower, tie not yet perfectly knotted. Looking almost human. It was Wednesday when everything started to crack. Elena woke to shouting. Not loud. The penthouse walls were too thick for that, but angry voices carrying from somewhere near the living room. She checked her phone. 3 a.m. What the hell? She pulled on a robe and crept down the hallway. The voices became clearer as she approached. Adrian and someone else. A man whose voice she didn't recognize. Can't keep protecting her, the stranger was saying. She's a liability. You know what happens to liabilities in our world. She's my wife. Adrian's voice was cold enough to frost glass. That makes her off limits to everyone. Your wife. The stranger laughed, sharp and bitter. A woman you married to shore up your image. Don't pretend this is about anything real. What it's about is none of your concern. Deliver the message to Constantine. She's protected. Anyone who touches her answers to me. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Get out. Elena heard footsteps, then the elevator opening and closing. She stood frozen in the hallway, her heart hammering. Someone was threatening her. Someone in Adrian's world saw her as a problem that needed solving. The living room light was still on. Elena knew she should go back to her room, pretend she'd heard nothing, but her feet carried her forward anyway. Adrian stood by the windows, one hand braced against the glass, his shoulders tight with tension. He'd pulled on pants but no shirt, and in the low light, Elena could see the bruising on his ribs had faded to ugly yellow-green. "How much did you hear?" he asked, without turning around. "Enough." Elena stepped into the room. "Who's Constantine?" "Someone I do business with." "Someone who wants me dead, apparently." "He doesn't want you dead. He wants leverage." Adrian finally turned to face her. "There are people who'd prefer I didn't have any personal attachments. It complicates things. So this is my fault?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Elena's hands clenched in the pockets of her robe. "I'm the complication, the liability, the mistake you're making." "Elena, no, I get it. I signed the contract. I knew there'd be consequences. I just didn't realize I'd be painting a target on my own back." Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "No one is going to hurt you. I've made that very clear. And if they don't listen, then they'll learn why people don't cross me." His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath, promise or threat, Elena couldn't tell. "You're under my protection. That means something in my world." "Your world is terrifying." "Yes, it is." Adrian's gaze held hers. "But you're safer in it than you were in yours. Your father's alive because of my world. Your sister's finishing school because of my world. Don't forget that." "I haven't forgotten. I never forget." Elena's voice cracked. "But I also can't stop wondering what other prices I'm going to pay. What other dangers I didn't sign up for." "You signed up for all of it. That was the deal." "The deal didn't mention people wanting to use me against you." "It was implied." Adrian's hand came up, hesitating near her face before dropping back to his side. "This is who I am, Elena. What I am. You knew that going in. Knowing it and living it are different things." Something flickered in his expression. "I'm aware." They stood in the dim living room, the city glittering behind them, and Elena realized she was shaking, not from fear, or not just from fear, but from the accumulated weight of everything, the contract, the lies, the performance, and now actual threats from people whose names she didn't know, but whose intentions were crystal clear. "I should go back to bed," she said finally. "Elena, what?" She looked up at him, exhausted and frustrated, and so tired of pretending she was handling any of this well. "What do you want me to say? That I'm fine? That I'm not scared? I can't give you that." "I don't want you to give me anything." Adrian's voice was rough. "I just want you to understand that I won't let anyone hurt you. That matters to me." "Why?" "Because you're mine to protect." The words landed wrong, possessive and territorial in a way that should have made Elena angry, but underneath the claim she heard something else, something that sounded almost like he actually cared whether she lived or died beyond the practicalities of their arrangement. "Get some sleep," Adrian said, stepping back. "We'll talk more in the morning." Elena didn't argue. She walked back to her bedroom on unsteady legs and climbed into bed, but sleep refused to come. She lay awake watching shadows shift across the ceiling, thinking about threats and protection and the strange dynamic developing between her and the man who'd bought her life. Morning brought no clarity, just Margaret's concerned face and breakfast Elena couldn't eat. "Mr. Voss left early," Margaret said, refilling Elena's coffee. "He said to tell you he'd be back by noon." "Did he say why?" "He rarely does, dear." Elena pushed food around her plate, her appetite gone. The penthouse felt too quiet, too empty. She found herself checking her phone every 5 minutes, waiting for news she didn't want to hear. Adrian returned at 11:30, Marcus close behind. They were deep in conversation, their expressions grim. When Adrian saw Elena in the living room, he nodded toward his office. "We need to talk." Marcus stayed in the living room while Elena followed Adrian into the inner sanctum she'd never entered before. The office was surprisingly sparse. Desk, chairs, wall of monitors showing security feeds. No personal items, no photographs, nothing that revealed anything about the man who worked here. Adrian closed the door. Constantine's made his position clear. He wants you gone. Not dead necessarily, but out of the picture. How generous of him. I've made my position equally clear. You stay. He backs off. End of discussion. And if he doesn't back off, then we have a different kind of conversation. Adrian leaned against his desk, studying her. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you trust me? Elena almost laughed. That's a loaded question. It's a necessary one. She thought about it, really thought. I trust that you'll protect me because it serves your interests. I trust that you won't hurt me directly. Beyond that? She shook her head. I don't know you well enough to trust you. Fair enough. Adrian nodded slowly. Then trust this. I'm moving you somewhere safer for a few days. Somewhere Constantine can't touch you while I handle this situation. Moving me where? A property I own outside the city. It's secure, private. You'll have everything you need. I'm not going anywhere. The words came out harder than Elena intended. I'm not running. This isn't running. It's strategy. It's you shipping me off so you can handle your business without worrying about the liability. Elena crossed her arms. I'm not going, Adrian. If I'm really under your protection, then protect me here. That's not, what, smart? Safe? Too bad. I spent my whole life being shuffled around, told where to go, what to do. I signed a contract that took away my freedom, but I'm drawing the line at being sent away like luggage. Adrian's jaw tightened. You're being unreasonable. I'm being human. There's a difference. They stared at each other across the office, neither willing to bend. Elena could see the calculation happening behind Adrian's eyes, weighing her stubbornness against his need for control, trying to find a solution that satisfied both. If you stay, he said finally, you follow my security protocols exactly. No leaving the building without Marcus. No contact with anyone outside our circle. No arguments when I tell you to do something. Fine. I mean it, Elena. This isn't a game. You think I don't know that? Her voice rose. Someone wants to use me against you. Maybe kill me. I understand the stakes. Do you? Adrian moved closer. Because understanding intellectually and accepting the reality are very different things. This isn't your diner job where the worst thing that happens is a rude customer. This is my world, where people disappear for being inconvenient. Then make me less inconvenient. Elena held her ground even though he was close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. Teach me how to navigate your world instead of hiding me from it. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. You want to learn? I want to survive. If that means understanding the rules of your game, then yes, teach me. He studied her for a long moment. All right, but it starts now, and you do exactly what I say. The rest of the day became an education in paranoia. Adrian walked her through the penthouse's security systems, showing her the cameras, the safe room, the emergency protocols. Marcus demonstrated the panic button she was to carry at all times. They changed her phone, her email, everything that could potentially be tracked or compromised. You're scaring me, Elena said as they went through her third security briefing. Good. Adrian didn't look up from the tablet he was configuring. Scared keeps you alive. By evening, Elena's head was spinning with codes and protocols and contingency plans. When Margaret served dinner, Elena could barely focus on eating. Adrian sat across from her, still working, his attention divided between his food and whatever crisis he was managing on his phone. Does it ever stop? Elena asked. The threats, the danger, the constant vigilance. No. Adrian set down his phone. This is the cost of power. Everyone wants what you have, and they'll do anything to take it. Sounds lonely. It is. He said it simply, like he was commenting on the weather. But loneliness is survivable. Betrayal isn't. Is that why you don't trust anyone? I trust Marcus. I trust Margaret. I trusted my father before he died. Adrian picked up his wine glass. Trust is a luxury. Most people can't afford it. I trusted people. Elena pushed her food around. Trusted my father when he said he'd fix his mistakes. Trusted that working hard would be enough. Trusted that doing the right thing mattered. And where did that get you? Here, married to a man I barely know, hiding from threats I don't understand. She looked up at him. But at least my father's alive. At least Sophie's safe. So maybe trust was worth it. Adrian's expression softened fractionally. You're an optimist. I'm a realist who happens to believe that some things are worth the risk. Like trust? Like family. Elena set down her fork. You said your father died. What happened? For a moment, she thought Adrian wouldn't answer. He stared at his wine glass, his expression unreadable. Then, heart attack, 5 years ago. He built everything I have now, and then one day his heart just stopped. I'm sorry. Don't be. He lived the life he chose. Did you have a choice? About following him into this business? Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. No one has a choice about the family they're born into. You either embrace it or run from it. I chose to embrace it. Do you ever regret that choice? Every day. He finished his wine. But regret doesn't change anything. It just makes you weak. Elena thought about that as they finished dinner in silence. Thought about a man who'd inherited an empire and the weight that came with it. Who'd chosen power over happiness, control over connection. Who measured everything in terms of strategic value because letting himself care about anything was too dangerous. It made her sad and angry, and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. They were cleaning up when Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We have a problem. Adrian was on his feet instantly. What kind of problem? Constantine's men, they're asking questions about Mrs. Voss, about her family. Elena's blood went cold. Sophie? She's safe, Marcus said quickly. I have someone watching her, but they know about your father, about the hospital. How? Elena looked at Adrian. How do they know? Because information is currency. Adrian's voice was flat. And someone sold yours. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Her family, the people she'd sacrificed everything to protect, were now targets because of her. Because she'd married Adrian. Because she'd thought she could play in his world without consequences. What do we do? She asked, her voice shaking. We move them. Adrian was already pulling out his phone. Your sister and father, tonight. Somewhere safe where Constantine can't touch them. Move them where? My property upstate, the one I wanted to send you to. It's secure, protected. They'll be safe there until this is resolved. Sophie won't go. She'll fight. She'll... Then convince her. Adrian handed Elena his phone. Call her. Now. Tell her the truth if you have to, but get her to agree. Elena took the phone with trembling hands. Sophie answered on the third ring, annoyed and confused about the unknown number. It's me, Elena said. Don't hang up. I need you to listen. Elena, what? You're in danger. Dad's in danger. People are asking questions about you, and they're not friendly people. Elena's words tumbled out fast. There are men watching you already, Adrian's men to keep you safe, but we need to move you somewhere more secure. What are you talking about? Sophie's voice rose. What people? Why would anyone? Because of me. Because I married someone who has enemies, and those enemies want to use you against him. Silence. Then, I'm coming to get you. Right now. We're leaving the city. No. Elena cut her off. That's the worst thing you could do. These people don't play games, Sophie. They'll hurt you to hurt him, and I can't let that happen. Then what am I supposed to do? There's a safe house, upstate. You and Dad will go there tonight. Adrian's people will move you, protect you. You'll be safe there. For how long? I don't know. Elena's voice cracked. Until Adrian fixes this. Until the threat is gone. And you? What happens to you? I stay here. I'm protected. Protected. Sophie's laugh was bitter. By the same man who put us in danger in the first place. By the man who's keeping us alive. Elena closed her eyes. Please, Sophie, trust me. One more time. Another long silence. Elena could hear her sister breathing, processing, weighing terrible options. Finally, okay, we'll go, But if anything happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me. Promise. I promise. The lie tasted like ash. I love you. Love you too. Elena ended the call and handed the phone back to Adrian. She agreed. Good. He was already texting Marcus. They'll be moved within the hour, full security detail. No one gets close to them. This is my fault. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. I brought this on them. No. Adrian's tone was sharp. This is Constantine's fault. He's the one making threats. You're just caught in the middle. Because I married you. Because you saved your family the only way you could. He stepped closer. Don't take responsibility for someone else's cruelty. Elena wanted to believe that, wanted to let herself off the hook, but the guilt sat in her stomach like lead, heavy and inescapable. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. Marcus coordinated the move while Adrian made phone calls in his office, his voice carrying that particular coldness that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Elena sat in the living room, her phone in her hand, waiting for confirmation that Sophie and her father were safe. It came at midnight. A text from an unknown number, package secure, all quiet. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. Adrian emerged from his office, looking exhausted. They're safe, he said. Not a question. Yes. Good. He poured himself a drink, then poured a second and handed it to Elena. Drink this. You look like you need it. She did. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a good burn, a reminder that she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. What happens now? She asked. Now I have a conversation with Constantine. Make it clear that this ends. Tonight. And if he doesn't listen? Adrian's smile was cold. Then he learns why everyone else does. He left the penthouse 20 minutes later, Marcus at his side. Elena wanted to ask where they were going, what Adrian planned to do, but she already knew the answer would be vague or non-existent. This was his world, his rules. She was just trying to survive it. She should have gone to bed, should have tried to sleep. Instead, Elena paced the living room, her mind racing with scenarios she couldn't control. What if Adrian's meeting went wrong? What if Constantine decided escalation was better than backing down? What if this entire situation spiraled into violence that swallowed everyone in its path? At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. It's handled. Go to sleep. Elena stared at the message. Handled. What did that mean? Was Constantine dead? Scared? Had they reached some agreement? She'd probably never know the details. Adrian didn't share that kind of information, but her family was safe. She was safe. For now, that had to be enough. She finally crawled into bed as dawn started breaking over the city, her body exhausted but her mind still spinning. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by dreams of threats she couldn't see and protection she couldn't trust. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Adrian was sitting in the chair by her door. Elena shot upright, her heart hammering. What are you doing? Watching you sleep. He said it calmly, like this was perfectly normal behavior. You were having nightmares. So you just sat there? Someone needed to make sure you were all right. Elena pulled the blanket up, suddenly aware she was wearing nothing but a tank top and shorts. That's creepy, you know that? Probably. Adrian stood, moving toward the door. But you're safe. That's what matters. Adrian? She stopped him before he could leave. What did you do? To Constantine? He turned back, his expression unreadable. I convinced him that touching my family would be the last mistake he'd ever make. Your family. Elena repeated the word slowly. You said my family. I did. I'm not... She faltered. We're not really... Aren't we? Adrian leaned against the doorframe. You live in my home. You wear my ring. You share my name. By every definition that matters in my world, you're my wife, my family, and I protect what's mine. Before Elena could respond, he was gone. She sat in bed, staring at the empty doorway, trying to process what had just happened. The way Adrian had looked at her, the possessive certainty in his voice, the fact that he'd spent hours watching her sleep just to make sure she was all right. This wasn't part of the contract. This was something else entirely. And Elena didn't know if that terrified her or thrilled her more. The fragile peace lasted exactly 4 days. Elena spent those days in a strange limbo, not quite relaxed, not quite terrified. Sophie sent updates from the safe house. Their father was settling in, still unaware of the danger he'd been in. Adrian came and went like clockwork, his schedule returning to its brutal normal. But something had shifted between them after that night. The way he looked at her lingered a fraction longer. The way she found excuses to be in whatever room he occupied. Neither of them acknowledged it. Safer that way. Thursday afternoon, Elena was reading in the library when Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. "Mrs. Voss, we need to move. Now." Elena was on her feet instantly. "What's wrong?" "Someone breached the building's security, lower levels. We're taking you to the safe room until Mr. Voss arrives." "Breached how?" "Questions later. Moving now." Marcus's hand went to the weapon at his hip. "Come with me." Elena's heart hammered as she followed Marcus down the hallway. The safe room was behind a hidden panel in Adrian's office. Reinforced steel, independent air supply, communications equipment. Marcus had shown her during the security briefings, but she'd never expected to actually use it. The panel slid open. Marcus ushered her inside. "Lock it behind me," he said. "Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Voss or me. You have the code." "Where are you going?" "To secure the perimeter. Go." The panel closed, leaving Elena in the dim safe room with nothing but her racing thoughts and a bank of monitors showing security feeds throughout the building. She watched Marcus disappear toward the elevator, watched Margaret hurry into her quarters, watched the lobby 40 floors below where everything looked perfectly normal. Then she saw them. 3 men in maintenance uniforms, moving with the kind of precision that had nothing to do with fixing pipes. They split up. 2 heading for the stairwell, 1 toward the elevator. The cameras tracked them as they climbed, their faces obscured by caps pulled low. Elena's phone buzzed. "Adrian." "Are you in the safe room?" No greeting, just urgency. "Yes, Marcus put me here. Adrian, there are men." "I know, I'm 10 minutes out. Don't open that door for anyone." "What if Marcus knows the protocol." 10 minutes, Elena. Can you do that?" "Yes." Her voice shook despite her best effort to control it. "What's happening?" Constantine decided to make his point after all. Adrian's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm handling it. Just stay safe." The call ended. Elena stared at the monitors, watching the men climb higher. 25th floor. 30th. They knew where they were going. This wasn't random. On the screen, Marcus appeared from the stairwell, weapon drawn. He spoke into his radio, then positioned himself near the penthouse elevator. Elena couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language screamed readiness for violence. The elevator dinged, the doors opened. What happened next unfolded too fast for Elena to fully process. Marcus moved, the intruder moved, and then there were flashes, gunfire, she realized with horror, and Marcus was down, clutching his shoulder while the intruder advanced. Elena's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. She should call for help, should do something, but she was locked in a steel box while Marcus bled on the floor and armed men breached the only home she had left. The penthouse door exploded inward. 2 men rushed through, weapons raised. They moved through the space with practiced efficiency. Clearing rooms. Coming closer to the office. Elena backed away from the monitors, her breath coming in short gasps. The door was reinforced. They couldn't get in. Adrian had promised she'd be safe here. But watching them search, knowing they were looking for her specifically, made safety feel like a very relative concept. One of the men stopped outside the office. He tried the handle. Locked. He said something to his partner, then raised his weapon. The gunshots were muffled but distinct. The lock held for the first 3 rounds, then gave way on the 4th. The office door swung open. Elena pressed herself against the far wall of the safe room, praying the hidden panel would hold. Praying Adrian would arrive. Praying for anything that would make this nightmare end. The men searched the office. She could hear them moving furniture, opening drawers. One of them spoke in a language she didn't recognize. Russian, maybe. The other responded, frustrated. Then silence. Elena held her breath. Seconds stretched into minutes. Were they gone? Were they waiting? She couldn't tell from the monitors. The office camera had a blind spot where the safe room panel was located. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Come out, Mrs. Voss. We know you're there. Make this easy." Elena's blood turned to ice. They knew. Somehow they knew about the safe room. Another text. "Your husband arrives in 5 minutes. You come out now, we leave quietly. You make us wait, everyone dies, including the housekeeper. Margaret." They had Margaret. Elena's finger hovered over Adrian's number. She should call him, should tell him what was happening, but 5 minutes, that's all she had to keep everyone alive. The decision made itself. Elena entered the code with shaking hands. The panel slid open. She stepped into the office, hands raised, and came face to face with 2 men who looked at her like she was cargo, not a person. "Smart choice," the taller one said in heavily accented English. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Now we go." "Let Margaret go first." "No negotiation. Then you'll have to drag me." Elena planted her feet, surprising herself with her own stubbornness. "I'm not moving until I know she's safe." The men exchanged glances. The shorter one spoke into a radio. A moment later, Margaret appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed and terrified but unharmed. "Go," Elena told her. "Get to the stairwell. Now." Margaret hesitated. "Mrs. Voss, go." Margaret ran. The taller man yanked Elena toward the elevator. "Your husband made enemy of wrong person," he said as they moved. "Constantine sends message. You are message." "How original." Elena's voice shook, but anger was starting to burn through the fear. "Does Constantine always hide behind hired thugs, or does he occasionally do his own dirty work?" The man's grip tightened. "You talk too much." They passed Marcus in the hallway. He was conscious, applying pressure to his shoulder wound with one hand while trying to reach his radio with the other. His eyes met Elena's, full of rage and apology. "I'm sorry," he managed. "Not your fault," Elena said, then gasped as the tall man shoved her forward. The elevator ride down felt endless. Elena's mind raced, calculating odds that didn't look good. Adrian was coming, but would he arrive in time? These men were professionals. They'd breached building security, overpowered Marcus, and were extracting her with terrifying efficiency. Whatever Constantine had planned, it wasn't good. The lobby was chaos. Building security lay unconscious near the front desk. The few residents who'd been present were huddled in corners, terrified. A van idled at the curb, back doors open. They were halfway across the lobby when the front doors exploded inward. Adrian came through like a force of nature, 3 men behind him, weapons drawn. His eyes found Elena immediately, and the expression on his face was something she'd never seen before. Pure, incandescent rage mixed with fear. "Let her go," Adrian said, his voice carrying across the lobby. "Now." The tall man holding Elena pulled a gun, pressing it against her temple. "You back off. We leave. Everyone lives." "That's not how this works." "Then she dies. Your choice." Elena felt the cold metal against her skin and realized with crystal clarity that she might actually die today. After everything, the contract, the arrangement, the carefully constructed new life, it might end in a lobby with a gun to her head. She looked at Adrian. His weapon was trained on the man holding her, his stance rock steady. But his eyes were full of something that looked almost like desperation. "It's okay," Elena heard herself say. "Let them go. I'm not worth a war." "Shut up," Adrian snapped, not taking his gaze off the gunman. "You don't get to decide what you're worth." "Actually, I do. And I'm deciding that whatever Constantine wants, it's not worth more people dying." "Elena, let them take me. End this." "No." The word was flat, final. "That's not an option." The standoff stretched. Elena could feel the gunman's tension, his finger on the trigger. Could see Adrian calculating angles, odds, possibilities. Could sense the violence about to erupt. Then Marcus's voice crackled over Adrian's radio. "South entrance, 2 more vehicles. This is a distraction." Adrian's eyes widened fractionally. He spoke without looking away from Elena. "How many?" "At least 6, coming up fast." The gunman smiled. "Too late. We just needed time." Everything happened at once. The man holding Elena moved, trying to drag her toward the door. Adrian fired. Someone screamed. Elena felt herself falling, hitting the marble floor hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. More gunshots, shouting in multiple languages, the acrid smell of gunpowder. Then Adrian was there, pulling her up, checking her for injuries with hands that shook despite his controlled expression. "Are you hurt?" "I don't think so." Elena's ears were ringing. "Adrian, they said south entrance." "I know, we're leaving, now." He half carried her through a service corridor she didn't know existed, his men forming a protective barrier around them. Behind them, Elena could hear more gunfire, more chaos. They burst through a door into a parking garage where a car waited, engine running. Adrian shoved her into the back seat and climbed in after her. The driver, someone Elena had never seen, peeled out before the doors were fully closed. "Where are we going?" Elena managed. "Somewhere safe." The penthouse was supposed to be safe. Nowhere in the city is safe. Not anymore. Adrian was on his phone, barking orders. Constantine escalated. "We're responding in kind." "What does that mean?" "It means we're leaving until I can eliminate the threat permanently." The car wove through traffic at speeds that made Elena grab the door handle. She watched the city blur past, everything familiar becoming distant and unreachable. Sophie and her father were already at the safe house. Now Elena was being evacuated too. Constantine had successfully torn apart the life Adrian had built. They drove for 3 hours, heading north into increasingly rural territory. By the time they pulled onto a private road, darkness had fallen. The house that appeared at the end of the drive was nothing like the penthouse. Smaller, older, built for function rather than display. But the security was evident. Guards, cameras, reinforced doors. Adrian helped Elena out of the car. She was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Her legs barely supported her weight. Inside, Adrian said, his arm around her waist, "You need to sit down." The interior was sparse but comfortable. Adrian guided her to a couch and disappeared, returning with water and a blanket despite the house being perfectly warm. "Drink this." Elena obeyed, her hands wrapped around the glass to stop them shaking. "Marcus, is he? He'll live. Shoulder wound, clean through. He's already giving the doctors hell. And Margaret? Safe." She got out before the second team arrived. Adrian sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You shouldn't have left the safe room." "They threatened Margaret." "So you just walked out? Handed yourself over?" "What was I supposed to do, let them hurt her?" Adrian's jaw clenched. "You were supposed to stay safe. That was the only job you had." "My job was to be your wife. To protect your interests. Margaret is part of this household. That makes her my responsibility too." "Your responsibility is to not get yourself killed." His voice rose, control finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what could have happened? What they would have done to you?" "I have a pretty good idea, actually." "Then why? Why risk it?" "Because someone had to." Elena set down the water glass. "You weren't there. Marcus was down. Those men were going to hurt people to get to me. I made a choice. A stupid choice. Maybe. But it's the choice I made." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not going to apologize for trying to protect someone." Adrian stared at her, something working behind his eyes. Then unexpectedly, he laughed, short, sharp, without humor. "You're completely insane, you know that?" "I've been told. You could have died today." "But I didn't. Because you came." Elena reached out, her hand finding his. "You came for me." "Of course I came for you. You're—" Adrian stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "You're mine to protect. I don't fail at that." "Is that all I am? A responsibility?" The question hung between them. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. "No," he said finally. "You're not just a responsibility." "Then what am I?" He looked at her then, really looked, the way he had that morning when he'd watched her sleep, like he was seeing past the arrangement and the contract into something neither of them had anticipated. "I don't know," Adrian admitted. "I don't know what you are, but you're not nothing. You're not just—" He gestured vaguely. "This was supposed to be simple, a transaction, but you made it complicated." "I didn't do anything." "You did everything. You fought me. You questioned me. You walked out of that safe room to protect someone you barely know. You made me—" He stopped again, visibly frustrated. You made me care whether you lived or died beyond the practical implications. Elena's breath caught. Adrian, don't! He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm saying you matter. That's all. You matter enough that I'm not willing to use you as bait or sacrifice you to make a point, but that doesn't change what we are. And what are we? Two people trapped in an arrangement. He moved to the window, staring out into darkness. Two people trying to survive something neither of us chose. You chose this. You made the offer. I chose the arrangement. I didn't choose. Adrian's shoulders tensed. I didn't choose to give a damn about you beyond your utility, but here we are. Elena stood, her legs steadier now. She crossed to where Adrian stood, stopping close enough to see his reflection in the window glass. Would it be so terrible? She asked quietly. Giving a damn? Yes. No hesitation. Because caring makes you weak, makes you vulnerable, makes you do stupid things like storming a building because someone has the person you... He cut himself off. It's a liability I can't afford. But you did it anyway. Because I had to. Because letting Constantine take you would have been worse. Worse for your reputation, you mean? Worse for me. Adrian turned to face her, and the rawness in his expression made Elena's chest ache. Worse for me, Elena. Not my business. Not my image. Me. They stood in the dim room, close enough to touch, but not touching. Elena could see Adrian fighting something internal, want versus control, feeling versus safety. She recognized the battle because she was fighting it too. I didn't want this, she whispered. I didn't want to care about you. You're still the man who bought my freedom, who trapped me in a contract, who made me play a role I never auditioned for. I know. But I do care. Somehow, despite everything, I care whether you're safe, whether you come home, whether... She stopped, afraid of what she might say next. Whether what? Adrian's voice was rough. Whether this arrangement is all we'll ever be. The admission hung between them like a confession. Adrian reached out slowly, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness she didn't know he possessed. Elena! Whatever he was going to say died as gunfire erupted outside. Adrian moved instantly, pushing Elena away from the window. Get down! They hit the floor as glass shattered, more gunfire, shouting. Adrian's phone was already out, calling for backup, his weapon appearing from somewhere Elena hadn't seen him carrying it. They found us, he said, more to himself than to her. They actually found us. How? Doesn't matter. Stay low. There's a panic room downstairs. He pulled her toward the hallway as more bullets tore through the walls. We need to move. They crawled through the house, Adrian covering her body with his. The gunfire was closer now, definitely inside the perimeter. Elena's mind raced. They'd been here less than an hour. How had Constantine's people tracked them so quickly? Adrian pulled her into a bedroom. Closet. There's a hatch in the floor. Elena found it, her fingers fumbling with the handle. The hatch opened to reveal stairs leading down into darkness. Adrian pushed her through, following close behind. They descended into what looked like a basement bunker, concrete walls and reinforced door. Lock it, Adrian ordered, moving to a panel of monitors similar to the penthouse safe room. Lock it now. Elena turned the deadbolt. The door was solid steel, but above them, the sounds of violence continued. Multiple attackers. They'd come prepared this time. Your security, Elena said. Where are they? Dead or neutralized? Adrian's face was stone as he watched the monitors. This was coordinated, professional. They knew exactly where we'd be. How? Someone talked. His hands clenched. Someone in my organization told Constantine where to find us. The implications sank in slowly. A traitor. Someone close enough to know Adrian's movements had sold them out, had delivered Elena directly into enemy hands. Who? She asked. Who would... I don't know yet, but I will. Adrian checked his weapon, his expression murderous. And when I find them, they'll wish they'd never been born. The monitor showed armed men searching the house, 6 of them, moving with military precision. They knew what they were looking for, knew about the panic room. One of them stopped near a vent in the floor, spoke into a radio. The others converged. They're going to find us, Elena said, hearing the fear in her own voice. Not immediately. This door can hold for hours. And then what? Then my people arrive and kill everyone up there. Adrian turned from the monitors, his jaw tight. But that won't help if whoever betrayed us keeps feeding information to Constantine. So we're trapped. We're contained. There's a difference. Elena wanted to laugh at his stubborn insistence on semantic distinctions, even now, but fear strangled the sound. They were in a concrete box while armed men searched for them. Her family was at another safe house that might already be compromised. And somewhere in Adrian's organization, someone had decided she was worth selling out. "I'm sorry," she said. Adrian looked at her sharply. "For what?" "For being the liability that made this possible. If you'd never married me, if I'd never married you, Constantine would have found some other way to come after me. This isn't about you, Elena. It's about power, control, eliminating threats." He moved closer. "You're just the excuse he's using. A convenient excuse. Yes, but not the cause." Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness. "Stop taking responsibility for other people's choices." His grip was warm, solid, the only stable thing in a situation spinning rapidly out of control. Elena held on like he was an anchor keeping her from drowning. Above them, something exploded. The bunker shook. Elena pressed closer to Adrian instinctively, and his arm came around her, protective and possessive at once. "They're trying to breach the door," he said calmly, as if commenting on the weather. "It won't work, but they'll try." "How long until your people arrive?" 20 minutes when I called, probably 15 now." "That's a long time." "It's survivable." Adrian's voice dropped lower. "I need you to know something. If this goes wrong, if they get through that door—" "Don't," Elena cut him off. "Don't talk like we're not getting out of this. I'm not being pessimistic, I'm being realistic, and I need you to know that He paused, struggling. "That you were right. This stopped being just an arrangement somewhere along the way. I don't know when, but it did." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Adrian, let me finish. I spent 5 years building walls, keeping everyone at arm's length, trusting no one. And then you signed that contract and moved into my home, and somehow," he made a frustrated sound, "somehow you got past every defense I have, made me care about something other than survival and power. I didn't mean to. I know. That's what makes it worse. You weren't trying. You just existed, fought back, refused to be what I expected. And now I can't imagine my life without you in it, which is the stupidest, most dangerous thing I could possibly admit." Tears burned in Elena's eyes. "That's the most words you've ever said to me at once." "I'm aware. And the most honest. Also aware." Above them, the explosions continued. But in their concrete shelter, Elena reached up and touched Adrian's face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled emotion he was trying to manage. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I didn't want to. I fought it. But I do." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, like her words caused physical pain. When he opened them again, they were full of something Elena had never seen before. Not just want or need, but something deeper, something that looked almost like hope. "If we survive this," he said, "things are going to change between us." "How?" "I don't know yet. But I'm not going back to separate bedrooms and pretending you're just a contractual obligation." "What are you going to do instead?" "Figure out how to actually be married. To someone I give a damn about." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "If you'll have me, actually have me. Not just the arrangement." Elena's answer was swallowed by gunfire so close it sounded like it was inside the bunker. They both froze, listening. Then Adrian's phone lit up with an incoming call. "My team," he said, answering. "Status?" Elena couldn't hear the other side, but she watched Adrian's expression shift from tension to cold satisfaction. "Good. I want them all alive for questioning, and I want to know who gave up our location within the hour." He ended the call. "It's over, for now." The door unlocked from the outside. Adrian positioned himself between Elena and whoever was coming through, weapon raised. But it was Marcus who appeared, blood-stained and furious but alive. "Building secure," he said. 6 hostiles neutralized, 2 alive for interrogation. "My wife?" Adrian didn't move. "Safe. Shaken, but safe." Marcus's gaze found Elena. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Voss. I failed you twice today. You didn't fail anyone. Elena stepped around Adrian, ignoring his protest. You did your job. We're all still breathing. That's what matters. They emerged into a house that looked like a war zone. Bullet holes everywhere, broken furniture, blood on the floor. Elena tried not to look too closely at the covered bodies being carried out. Adrian kept her close as they moved to a secured room where his remaining team had set up a temporary command center. Maps, laptops, and two men zip-tied to chairs, looking significantly worse for wear. Who told Constantine where to find us? Adrian asked them, his voice deadly calm. Neither man spoke. Adrian pulled his weapon, checking the chamber with deliberate care. I'm going to ask once more. Then I start removing body parts. Who told Constantine? Your lawyer, one of them finally spat. Preston? He's been feeding information for months. The name hit Adrian like a physical blow. Elena saw it in the way his entire body tensed, in the flash of betrayal across his face before he locked it down. Preston, he repeated slowly. The man who drew up our marriage contract, who has access to everything. He said you were weak, that you'd gone soft over some girl. The man laughed, bloody teeth showing. Looks like he was right. Adrian moved so fast Elena almost missed it. The gun pressed against the man's temple, his finger tight on the trigger. Say that again, Adrian whispered. Adrian, Elena's voice cut through the tension. Don't, he's not worth it. He just told me that someone I trusted for years betrayed me, endangered you, got my men killed. He's worth every bullet I have. Maybe. But you're better than that. No, I'm really not. Then be better for me. Elena moved closer, her hand on his arm. Let the authorities handle him, or handle him your way later. But right now, I need you not covered in blood in front of me. Adrian held position for another 5 seconds. Then slowly, he lowered the weapon. Get them out of here, he told Marcus, and find Preston. I don't care where he's hiding. Find him. The men were dragged away. Adrian stood rigid, his control visibly fraying. Elena had seen him cold, angry, dangerous, but this was different. This was personal. 5 years, he said quietly. I trusted him for 5 years, told him everything, and he sold us out. I'm sorry. He knew about your family, about the safe house, about every weakness we have. Adrian turned to her, his expression raw. He could have gotten you killed. But he didn't. We're alive. This time. What about next time? What about when I can't protect you fast enough? Then we deal with it together. Elena took his hand. But we're here now. We're alive now. And you stopped them. Adrian pulled her close suddenly, his arms wrapping around her with surprising desperation. Elena felt him shaking, the adrenaline crash finally hitting, all the fear and rage he'd been suppressing breaking through. I can't lose you, he said against her hair. I just figured out I have you. I can't lose you. Elena held him tight, her own tears finally falling. You won't. I'm not going anywhere. It was a promise neither of them could guarantee. But in that moment, standing in the wreckage of Adrian's safe house, with enemies closing in and traitors being exposed, it was the only truth that mattered. They'd survived, together, and whatever came next, they'd face it the same way. They found Preston 3 days later in a hotel 2 states over, trying to book a flight to somewhere without extradition treaties. Marcus delivered him to Adrian's new location, a third safe house, more fortress than home, with the kind of satisfaction that came from completing a hunt. Elena watched through the security monitors as they dragged Preston inside. He looked smaller than she remembered from the contract signing. Diminished. A man who'd made a catastrophic miscalculation and now had to face the consequences. I don't want you in the room, Adrian said, checking his weapon with mechanical precision. Too bad. Elena, he betrayed both of us. I have just as much right to hear what he has to say. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. They walked together to the basement where Preston sat zip-tied to a chair, looking like he was trying very hard not to vomit. Adrian, Preston started, his voice shaking. Listen, I can explain. Explain how you sold out my location to the man trying to kill my wife? Adrian's voice was conversational. Pleasant, even. Which somehow made it more terrifying. Please, I'm fascinated. Constantine offered me money, a lot of money, and he said, He promised no one would get hurt. Just scare you a little, make you realize. Realize what? Preston's gaze flickered to Elena. That she was making you weak, that marrying her was a mistake, that you needed to focus on business instead of… He stopped, seeming to realize that continuing would only make things worse. Instead of what? Adrian stepped closer. Instead of caring about something other than profit and power? Instead of building a life that's more than just survival? You were different after she came. Distracted. Making choices based on emotion instead of strategy. And that bothered you. It made you vulnerable. Preston's voice rose. The Adrian Voss I knew wouldn't have moved heaven and earth for one person, wouldn't have declared war over a woman he barely knew, but you did. You changed. I evolved. Adrian's hand was steady on his weapon. You stayed the same, short-sighted, greedy, willing to endanger lives for a payout. I didn't think they'd actually… Preston swallowed hard. Constantine said he just wanted leverage, negotiating power. I didn't think… You didn't think I'd come after you. Adrian's smile was cold. That was your second mistake. Your first was touching what's mine. Elena stepped forward before Adrian could do something permanent. How much did he pay you? Preston looked at her with something close to hatred. $2 million, up front. $2 million to betray a man who trusted you for 5 years, who built his entire legal infrastructure around your counsel. Elena shook her head. That's pathetic. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You saw an opportunity to get rich and you took it. Consequences be damned. People could have died. Did die. Adrian's security team. And for what? Money you'll never get to spend because you're either going to prison or… She glanced at Adrian. Well, or something else. Adrian had gone very still, watching her. You're right. He's pathetic. He lowered his weapon. Marcus, make the call. What call? Preston's eyes widened. Adrian, please. I'm turning you over to federal authorities. Conspiracy? Attempted murder. They've been wanting to take down Constantine's operation for years. You're going to help them do that. If I testify against Constantine, I'm dead. His people will… Yes, they will. Adrian's expression showed no mercy. But at least you'll die with your conscience clear, assuming you have one. They left Preston to his fate. Elena followed Adrian upstairs, her heart still racing from the confrontation. When they reached the main floor, Adrian stopped and turned to face her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For stopping me from killing him. For giving me a better option. I didn't give you anything. You made the choice. Because you were there. Adrian's hand found hers. Because you reminded me that I'm trying to be better than I was. Better than the man who only knew how to solve problems with violence. Elena squeezed his hand. You're already better than you think you are. The next morning brought news that Constantine had been arrested. Preston's testimony, combined with evidence Adrian's team had gathered, had finally given authorities enough to move. The threat that had hung over them for weeks was gone. Neutralized. Finished. Elena should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow, like she'd been running on adrenaline for so long that peace felt suspicious. What happens now? She asked Adrian over coffee. They were in the safe house kitchen, a space that felt temporary and strange compared to the penthouse they'd abandoned. Now we go home. To the tower? If you want. Or somewhere new, somewhere that doesn't have bullet holes in the walls and memories of men trying to kill you. Elena considered that. I think I want to go home. To the penthouse. It might be broken, but it's ours. Ours, Adrian repeated like he was testing the word. I like the sound of that. They returned to the city 2 days later. The penthouse had been repaired with remarkable efficiency. Walls patched, windows replaced, bullet damage erased like it had never happened. But Elena could still feel the ghost of violence in the space, could still remember the fear of hiding in the safe room while armed men searched for her. Margaret welcomed them back with tears and relief. Marcus stood at his post with his arm in a sling, refusing to take more time off despite doctor's orders. The household reassembled itself piece by piece, trying to return to something approaching normal. But normal had shifted. Elena and Adrian no longer maintained separate lives within the same space. He found reasons to be near her. She stopped retreating to her bedroom. They ate meals together and talked, really talked, about more than logistics and security protocols, about childhoods and lost parents, and dreams they'd abandoned along the way. I wanted to be an architect, Elena admitted one night. They were on the balcony, the city spread out below them like a constellation of possibilities. Before my mom died, before everything fell apart, I used to draw buildings, imagine spaces that made people feel safe. You could still do that, Adrian said. I'm 28. I'd be starting from nothing. So start from nothing. You've rebuilt your life from worse. Elena looked at him. You'd support that? Me going back to school? Pursuing something that has nothing to do with being your wife? I'd support anything that makes you happy. Adrian's expression was serious. The contract was about appearances, about what I needed. But that's not what this is anymore. Not what we are. What are we? I don't know. Something better than what we started as. Something real. 2 weeks later, Sophie and their father returned from the safe house. Robert Carter looked stronger than Elena had seen him in months, his color better, his movement steadier. Sophie was wary, suspicious of Adrian despite everything he'd done. So you're really staying with him? Sophie asked when they had a moment alone. This isn't Stockholm Syndrome or some trauma bond. It's not that simple. It never is with you. Sophie's voice softened. I just want to make sure you're choosing this. Actually choosing it, not just accepting it because you don't see another option. Elena thought about that, really thought. I'm choosing it. He's not perfect. Neither am I. But we're choosing each other. That's what matters. Meeting her father was harder. Robert Carter sat in the penthouse living room looking uncomfortable and out of place, his gaze moving from the expensive furniture to the man who'd saved his life. Mr. Voss, he started, his voice rough, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done, for my treatment, for protecting my girls. You don't need to thank me, Adrian said. Elena paid that debt. With her freedom, with her choice. Adrian glanced at Elena. And she made the right one. For what it's worth, I'm grateful she did. Robert studied Adrian for a long moment. Are you good to her? Really good to her? I'm trying to be, every day. Then that's enough. Robert reached out, offering his hand. Take care of my daughter. She deserves the world. Adrian shook his hand firmly. I know she does. I'm working on giving it to her. After they left, Elena found Adrian in his office, staring at nothing. You okay? She asked. Your father asked if I'm good to you? Adrian's voice was rough. I'm not sure I know how to be. I've spent so long being hard, being untouchable. I don't know how to be anything else. Elena crossed to him, taking his hands. Then we figure it out together. Learn together, make mistakes, and fix them together. What if I can't be what you need? What if you already are? She pulled him closer. You saved my family, protected me when you could have walked away. Chose prison for Preston instead of murder, even though violence would have been easier. You're already better than the man you were when we signed that contract. Adrian's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the office where so much had changed, where contracts had been signed and threats had been made, and a relationship had evolved from transaction to something neither of them could name but both recognized as real. The wedding had been cold, businesslike, a signature on paper and nothing more. But 3 months later, standing in a small chapel with only Margaret, Marcus, Sophie, and Robert as witnesses, Elena and Adrian married again. This time for themselves. This time as a choice, rather than an arrangement. I'm not good at this, Adrian said during his vows. At love. At being vulnerable. At trusting that someone won't use my weaknesses against me. But you've shown me that the risk is worth it. That being human is worth it. And I'm choosing to risk everything on you, on us. Elena's voice shook as she responded. I signed a contract out of desperation. Married you to save my family. I didn't expect to find a partner, didn't expect to care. But you proved that people can change, that ice can thaw. And I'm choosing you every day. Not because I have to, because I want to. The rings they exchanged weren't required by law or contract. They were promises. Commitments made freely instead of under duress. And when they kissed, it felt like beginning and ending at once. The death of what they'd been and the birth of what they were becoming. 6 months later, Elena started architecture school. She was the oldest in most of her classes, juggling assignments with the social obligations that came with being Adrian Voss's wife. But he made space for her dreams, cleared his schedule to help her study, celebrated her successes, and supported her through frustrations. "I'm proud of you," he told her after her first major presentation. "You're building something, creating something meaningful." "Like you built your empire? Better than my empire. You're building without blood on your hands." Adrian had changed too. Not completely. He was still hard-edged, still dangerous when threatened. But he'd started redirecting his resources, using his wealth and influence for more than just accumulating more wealth and influence, funding programs for families in debt, creating opportunities for people trapped by circumstance. "My father built this through fear," he explained to Elena one night. "I'm trying to rebuild it through something else. I don't know what yet, but something better." "Change," Elena said simply. "You're building change." A year after they'd signed the contract, Elena found herself back in the penthouse library where she'd spent so many lonely hours. But this time, Adrian was beside her, his arm around her shoulders as they looked out at the city. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Everything that happened, the way we started?" Elena thought about that stormy night, the contract, the fear and desperation that had driven her to sign away her freedom. Thought about everything that had followed, the danger, the betrayal, the slow realization that the arrangement had become something real. "I regret that my father got into debt," she said finally. "I regret that I didn't have better options. But I don't regret you. I don't regret us, even though I bought you. You didn't buy me. You gave me a choice when I had none. And yes, it was a terrible choice. A choice between awful options. But I made it. And somehow, impossibly, it led here. To you. To us. To something I never expected to find." Adrian pulled her closer. "I used to think love was weakness, that caring about someone gave them power over you, and I was right in a way. You have more power over me than anyone ever has. You could destroy me. But I won't. I know. That's what makes it different. That's what makes it worth the risk." He kissed her temple. "You taught me that some things are worth being vulnerable for, worth fighting for, worth changing for." They stood together as night fell over the city, two people who'd met through circumstance and choice and desperation, who'd built something real from a foundation of paperwork and fear, who'd learned that love didn't have to be perfect or pure or easy to be worth fighting for. The contract that had brought them together was still filed away somewhere, a legal document that no longer mattered, because the real marriage, the one they'd built through trial and survival and the slow accumulation of trust, existed beyond paperwork. It existed in the space between them. In the choice to stay when leaving would be easier, in the decision to be vulnerable when armor felt safer. Elena had signed that contract to save her family. But in doing so, she'd saved herself too. Found strength she didn't know she had. Found love in the last place she'd expected. Found that sometimes the worst choices lead to the best outcomes, and that the people we're forced to depend on can become the people we choose to love. Adrian had made that offer thinking he was buying a solution to his image problem, but he'd gotten something far more valuable, someone who saw past his armor, who challenged him, who made him want to be better than the man who only knew how to survive. They'd both been broken when they met, damaged by loss and circumstance and the grinding weight of trying to keep going when everything felt impossible. But somehow, improbably, they'd found a way to be broken together, to build something functional and real from the pieces of who they'd been. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no perfect ending where all problems dissolved and life became easy. Adrian still dealt with threats and difficult business. Elena still struggled with the weight of their arrangement's origin. They fought. They disagreed. They had days where the gap between who they'd been and who they were trying to become felt insurmountable. But they kept choosing each other, kept working, kept building. Because that's what love is, Elena realized. Not the lightning strike of romance novels or the perfect symmetry of movie endings, but the daily choice to stay, to fight for each other instead of against each other, to believe that two imperfect people can build something worth having if they're willing to do the work. Marcus interrupted their moment on the balcony, apologetic but firm. "Mr. Voss, there's a situation that needs your attention," Adrian sighed. "Work never stops." "Go," Elena said. "Handle it. I'll be here when you're done." Promise? Promise. He kissed her, brief but certain, and followed Marcus inside. Elena stayed on the balcony, watching the city and thinking about promises. About the ones made under duress and the ones made freely. About how sometimes the destination matters less than the journey, and how the worst moments can become the foundation for something better. She'd signed a contract to save her father, to protect her sister, to survive when all other options had evaporated. She'd walked into Adrian Voss's world expecting nothing but obligation and transaction. What she'd found instead was possibility, partnership, love that had grown not despite the difficult beginning, but somehow because of it. Because they'd been forced to see each other clearly, to work together, to build trust when trust felt impossible. The city glittered below, full of people making choices and living with consequences. Some of those choices would be good, some terrible. Most would fall somewhere in between, muddled and complicated and impossible to label as purely right or wrong. Elena had made a terrible choice that night she signed the contract, but she'd also made the best choice available to her. And somehow, impossibly, it had led to this. To standing on a balcony 40 floors up, wearing a ring that represented choice instead of obligation, waiting for a man she'd learned to love despite everything. Behind her, she heard Adrian's footsteps returning, felt his arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Situation handled, he murmured, for now. There's always a for now with you. Part of the package. I know. Elena leaned back against him. I signed up for it, both times. They stood together as the city breathed around them. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and made something good from it anyway. Who'd learned that survival and love weren't opposites, but sometimes the same thing. That the contracts we sign out of desperation can become the foundations we build our lives on. The story that had started with signatures and fear and a stormy night had become something else entirely. Something chosen, something real, something worth every terrible moment that had led them here. And if that wasn't redemption, Elena thought, it was close enough. She turned in Adrian's arms, looking up at the man who'd been her captor and become her partner, who'd bought her freedom and given her a different kind of freedom in return, who was still learning how to love but willing to keep trying. I choose you, she said. Simple. True. Every day I choose you. I choose you too, Adrian answered. Every day, every moment, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They kissed as the city lights flickered below them. Two imperfect people building an imperfect life that was somehow exactly what they both needed. The contract had brought them together. Choice kept them together. And love, messy, complicated, hard-won love, made it all worth it. That was the real story. Not the transaction or the danger or the dramatic moments of survival, but the quiet choice to stay. To build. To believe that two people from different worlds could find common ground and make it home. Elena had thought she was signing away her life that stormy night. What she'd actually done was sign up for a new one. A better one. One that she got to build with a man who'd proven that even the coldest hearts can thaw with enough patience and enough reason to try. And that ultimately was the only ending that mattered. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And chosen. And theirs.